is the BJ Show. Today's date is March 6th. It is a Thursday, and this is the A block, which means we start a little bit after 7 o'clock. And John, I apologize to you. We're a little bit after 7 o'clock this morning, and that is all due to my fault. Will you essentially forgive me?
Gladly. And you do so much that folks like me and other listeners, Brad, have no idea what you do behind the scenes to keep the show on the air. So great job this morning.
Yeah, the pedicure ran a little bit long this morning, so that's why I'm late. Okay, that is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. The reason I spell it is because you need to type that into the computer, put that into your smartphone, your tablet, whatever. JohnCombest.com, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. And why? Because he's the guy that has tons of information you need to know if you live in Missouri. Even if you don't live in Missouri, if you live some other place but you have interest in Missouri, like all the lobbyists that listen to us and all the D.C. The swamp people that listen on the show, you need to get into there and find out what's going on. Now, what we do is we start off the show with this guy right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
Because John takes all the various things he has on his johncombest.com site and gives us the top three. And Casey, what do we start with?
In third place,
piece of legislation we've talked about quite a bit cleared a major hurdle. The headline from the Post-Dispatch today and reporter Jack Suntrup, state takeover of St. Louis police clears hurdle in Missouri Senate. This is, of course, the legislation that would give more control over the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department to state actors rather than city actors. Rather than unique, exclusive control by the city of St. Louis, folks that are in state government would have a little bit more control. And I'll jump ahead to the next steps of this, and then we'll go back to how we got here. And the bottom line is, even though the bill passed the Senate yesterday, it still needs to go back to the Missouri House because there are changes, and it will still need to be passed once again by the Missouri Senate. Among the changes that we saw in the most recent version of this legislation, formerly there would be 5 members appointed to the board that oversee what's going on with the police department. With this bill, that number goes to 6. There were other objections from urban lawmakers that were addressed. For example, there are some folks in St. Louis City that think that the police officers union has too much power, and Senator Karla May is one of them. And in the new version of the bill, a member of the St. Louis Police Officers Association would not be part of the panel that oversees the Metropolitan Police Department. And that was a sticking point because Karla May says, look, the union just wants to have more control over what goes on here. Here's her quote. That's a conflict. This union is trying to control the police department without actually being the chief of police. And Brad, just to be clear here, the exact specification here is that the newest proposal doesn't include St. Louis Police Officers Association in the selection process for the board. So I think when I presented that a minute ago, I wasn't clear about that. So essentially, this one kind of takes the police union out of the discussion a little bit more. And then I would also point out that this piece by Suntrup says that the police control, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Control, is part of a bigger omnibus crime package. And I think the reason why that's important is Suntrup does a good job pointing out what some other black St. Louis area senators get out of the larger proposal. Senator Steve Roberts gets a piece of his legislation that if someone is exonerated by DNA evidence, that they get paid from the state. The state is finally going to be able to pay back some people who were wrongly convicted by the state. And Steve Roberts knows a thing or two about being wrongly accused. Senator Angela Mosley also gets her, quote, missing murdered African-American women task force as part of the legislation. So I guess the main idea and what Suntrup is driving at here, reading between the lines, is that this crime package includes a few things for black legislators that might help tamp down what would have been their opposition to this bill. You see what I'm saying, Brad?
John, a question for you. Karla May, isn't she a Dem?
She is a Dem, yeah.
I thought the Dems were all in for the for unions, and she's obviously not in for the police union. Isn't that what it sounds like to you?
Well, as my dear friend Brad Hildebrand likes to say, Democrats always march in lockstep, and they're always united against Republicans. So, yeah, what a novel piece of information, Brad.
So they're just doing it just to go against the Republicans, and it's not that.
No, I think what this is, I mean, Karla May has, to her credit, she's always been against what she would call state control or a state takeover of the St. Louis Police Department. And other observers, for example, Scott Fawn, every time this topic comes up, Scott Fawn talks about the fact, can you get Karla May to sit down and stop filibustering when this bill eventually comes to the Senate for final reading?
And
it's going to be hard. Go ahead, Brad.
by the way, I was going to say that Scott finally got the feedback that everybody was giving him that he didn't even realize.
Oh, what was that?
Well, when he did his daily updates, the guests were on the left. Now they're on the right.
They are on the right, are they not? Yeah. Now, why did you suggest that he change their position?
I did not. He just announced one day that he has a new set, and I always thought to myself, okay, why are his guests, who are normally righties, always on the left side? Now the righties are on the right side, right?
Now, hold on. Scott Fawn has a lot of Democrats on the show. In the last couple of weeks, he's had the great Maggie Nurenburn on. He's had plenty of Democrats on, Brad.
Yeah, but once you put him in that seat, there's a metamorphosis that happens.
Ooh, like a butterfly.
Yeah, they start to flap their wings and go, less legislation. Yes, less government control. That's what happens. There's some kind of magic seat cushion he's got there that takes those Dems and turns them into the Repubs. You know what I'm saying?
He got that idea from the Butterfly House, I think, here out at Fouts Park. Did you watch yesterday's show? It was a banger.
I did watch part of it with the goofy jackets.
Whoa, goofy, Brad. Your sartorial splendor assessment there might be a little off. Yeah, Ken Waller gave Scott that coat, and I guess maybe Ken Waller, the state rep, gave Jim Murphy another one. I'm not sure.
Well, let me just put it to you this way. Every time I see, if we're not talking about, he's got these stars and stripes sport jackets they're two guys are wearing, and they gave one to Scott. Every time I see that, it reminds me of the late Bob Romanek, the guy who had the 4 radio stations, who lost the 4 radio stations in the Metro East, because that's how he dressed. And
really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And matter of fact, there's pictures of him. And matter of fact, this is a true story. He would stand on Mark Kern's front lawn in his red, white, and blue. I think the pants were like, red and white stripes, and the sport jacket was like theirs. It had stars and stripes on it. I think he had like a stars and stripes tie, and he would stand on Mark Kern's front lawn in Belleville and cuss at Mark Kern and his wife. And so that's why I guess I'm a little bit tainted, because when I see people dressed like that, I think, oh, it's Bob Romanek again. And, Bob Romanek, who no longer is with us, who used to be a radio station owner who, quite honestly, and once again, another person who should have never owned radio stations, because when he was in his prime and he was using the N-word all the time, and there were all sorts of stories on him in the Post-Dispatch about how a terrible person he was, I had friends of mine saying, is that the kind of people that are in the radio business? I go, he's just one of them. You know what I mean? It was like you get slapped with that broad brush. You know what I'm saying, John?
I do know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Well, you're known for being a crazy man that goes on people's lawns and screams. So
I don't scream. I just urinate on their lawn, and I also poop on their lawn, which essentially, if they come out and yell at me, I go, hey, I'm fertilizing it.
Up a notch to number 2.
Well, speaking of people who feel fertilized on recently, FDA employees in St. Louis City, they've been whipsawed. Like that annoying song from 15 years ago, they whip their head back and forth. God, I hated that song. Anyway, the headline from St. Louis Public Radio, Brad's second favorite nonprofit station, is St. Louis FDA lab dodges federal DOJ threat, will remain open. Apparently, there was a big scare at the FDA that the feds were canceling the lease of the FDA facility. It's on Newstead in St. Louis's central rear end. But workers got a note on Wednesday, an email early on Wednesday afternoon that says, woo, rest easy. This FDA location will stay open. These workers perform critical functions, according to them, at the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Research. The most important takeaway here isn't what they do. It's not their quality of life. It's their mental health. And they say that they've been scared over the last few weeks. And one woman says, well, it doesn't say it's a woman, but it says it's a chemist who has a lot of anxiety. So you could connect the dots. She says, it's stressful. There's just random things happening from unknown sources. So DOGE continues to create terror in the federal workforce. We saw it in the piece from the Kansas City Star. The hefty woman was very upset. She was a probationary employee. She got let go. We have people at the FDA being whipped back and forth. They don't know if they're going to be there next week or not. Thanks, Elon. I hope you're happy, Brad.
You know, the Missouri Humane Society is missing a big deal right here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, they could play like some Sarah McLachlan music in the arms of an angel?
No. They could bring a bunch of their dogs in for these employees who are like, and you know, what do they call it? Safety dogs or what?
Emotional support dogs.
Emotional support dogs. There we go. They could, you know, the people at the agricultural department of Newstead need our help. Alarm goes off, Humane Society. They get a van. They put in like 20 German Shepherds. Away they go. They drive down there real quick. They open up the doors, and the people at the at the agriculture department go, oh my God, we feel so much better
Brad,
now.
it's the FDA. It's not. Don't besmirch workers at the ag department. This is the FDA, not agriculture.
FDA, all those alphabet. See, once again, you know, a not-for-profit helping out government workers. What better things in life are there than that? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's what you do, Brad. You operate your stations not for a profit, and government workers listen to them.
Yeah, they do. Okay, last but not least.
The number one.
From down in Springfield, Missouri, our friend Elijah Haahr, you know, he does a show with our friend Garrett Bowles. Hey, WTO, down in Springfield, they had one of the best follows on social media, a guy named Representative Louis Riggs. He's from Hannibal. He was on Elijah's show. You can follow him on Twitter at Riggs for Missouri. Brad, don't you dare, because you'll end up reply spamming him, and you'll end up sending him a message that says, Fisco, when he writes about the state budget. Louis Riggs was on Elijah's show talking about state Doge and talking about a few of the sillier things they found in state government. My favorite example, I know we only have a couple minutes here. My favorite example is Representative Riggs talks about the much ballyhooed COVID ventilators. Now, this issue has popped up in a few news stories and radio interviews before. Apparently, the state of Missouri at the beginning of the pandemic did what a lot of folks in governments did, which is they purchased ventilators. Remember, Brad, we originally heard, it's going to be so bad we're going to need ventilators. You remember that whole hubbub?
And everybody was making them. Ford Motor Company was making them.
Including a St. Louis company
right,
that
exactly.
made some piece of ventilators, and their penny stock skyrocketed. So the state of Missouri had a veritable truckload, probably several truckloads of ventilators. According to Representative Riggs, the state spends about $500,000 a year paying someone to service the COVID ventilators that are not used. Now, Representative Riggs has a great sense of humor. You'll see that on his social media, and you'll hear that in the interview with Elijah. And he's like, I know that COVID ventilators were like a thing for a while, and I know that COVID was a thing for a while, but why are we spending money to service ventilators we don't use? Nobody seems to have an answer for that. Now, my favorite quote from Representative Riggs says he referred to all the federal money that was coming in as federal crack cocaine money, which I think that's a good metaphor there. Local elected officials and state elected officials got these millions and billions of dollars, and it was like crack. They get addicted to it and think, where could we spend this money? And my second favorite quote, which is one that will play especially well with you, Brad, he's talking about the state office of administration. And he says, we've got an office of administration that loves buildings. They love owning them. They love renting them. Whether people in them or not, they love to buy and rent these things, Brad. And he was talking about trying to figure out, okay, if you say that we have a remote workforce and there's nobody in that building, are you heating and cooling that building or not? And there have been people, according to Representative Riggs, over the last several years, that when asked that question have just shrugged their shoulders and said, we don't know. So Missouri Doe's doing great stuff. Go listen to the Elijah interview. And if you don't have time to listen to the whole thing, do what I usually do in Apple Podcasts and just click on transcript, and you can read the transcript of the interview.
John, I'm going to defend myself here. First off, we need to talk about there is a new benchmark for the programming that's on KWMU, where yesterday Elaine Cha, and this probably you probably know all about this, had a whole segment on unicorn fart dust. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh God! Guess what? This is something I'm definitely going to have to fix when I go into Red Circle. Yes, Brad, say that phrase again.
unicorn fart dust. Do you know what that is, John?
No, Brad, I don't.
Okay, it's local.
Let's not pick this up in B block. Let's wrap it up in A block.
No, it's a meme coin started by a guy in Baldwin who it's turned out.
Yeah, sorry to stop. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah.
The Post-Dispatch had this up like 3 weeks ago.
Yes, and it's turned into the thing where the meme coin is worth like $70 million. And this guy sheepishly said, when she says, "Well, you started it. What's your holding?" And he says, "Well, I have 0.6%. Okay, so do the math, John. If it's 70 million, have 0.6%, wouldn't that mean you have like about $500,000 in
roughly, yeah, sure.
But what's interesting is every time I'm driving on 44, every time Elaine Cha says, "Unicorn fart dust," I about drive off the road. I'm thinking to myself, I've got it. Do they put those shows up on podcasts?
They do.
Okay, I'm going to grab that one and pull her off. That's going to be one of my new drops. Okay, that one, and I will explain. And you're always mad at me because I'm reply guy. I will explain to you my disco comment I make, and it's on one particular person on X, and he gets it, and it's in retribution to what he said on another radio show, which ticked me off. You want me to tell you that?
Then that makes you are not reply guy. If it makes sense, Brad. I took it out of context and I was wrong, and I apologize. I'm sorry for that.
Okay, next.
You know what I say, though? Disco.
B block. Okay, B block is coming up. Matter of fact, I've got to check my phone to see how my unicorn fart dust is doing. Can you believe that? When the first time I heard it, I'm punching buttons after I'm thinking to myself, is that what I thought I heard? Elaine Cha's talking about UFDs? Okay, we're way late this morning, and it's all my fault, and I apologize.